There's no doubt about it. The greenhouse gases we've been sending into our atmosphere are warming the Earth and transforming our planet. Global warming is having the biggest impact in the world's polar regions. In Antarctica, it's pushing penguins to the limit.
They can adjust to a lot. They can really deal with a lot. It's amazing to see what they can cope with. But they're gonna eventually run out of options.
Biologists have been studying Antarctica's penguin cities for more than a century. In recent years, they've seen global warming transform these cities.
A whole chunk of that ice sheet just fell off.
Nice.
Look at the wave coming along the coastline. Those penguins are gonna get swept away.
Oh my God.
Can penguins adapt to this rapidly changing environment?
So while the penguins are coping with these changes, humans are also going to be coping with the very same changes.
Very warm day.
How penguins respond to climate change can teach us much about the planet's future and our own. For scientists like Grant Ballard, the best place to study the effects of global warming is a city, but not one full of people.
Next stop, Antarctica.
A city full of penguins at the bottom of the world. Traveling to Antarctica isn't easy. There's no movie on this flight, and the meal service is almost as cold as their destination. Grant is part of a scientific team journeying to the edge of the Ross Ice Shelf, a glacier bigger than California. After a 3-day haul, they touch down at McMurdo Station, where the sea ice is thick enough to land giant military jets.
Here we are, the Great White South.
Made it. Welcome back.
From McMurdo, team members disperse to different field camps on Ross Island. In Antarctica, October marks the polar spring and 24 hours of daylight. Warming water breaks up the enormous sheets of sea ice that surround the continent in winter. And marine life surges into the rich coastal waters, including millions of Adelie penguins that are returning to their breeding colonies.
When you first get here, you're overwhelmed with the size of it. You know, there's just so many penguins.
There was all this noise just rising out of the colony, and it was pretty mind-blowing.
After 8 months at sea, living in the pack ice, penguins converge on Ross Island and its 3 penguin cities, Cape Royds, Cape Bird, and Cape Crozier. The final leg of their journey is made on foot, across miles of solid sea ice that still surrounds the island. The first penguins to arrive are the established breeders, somewhere between 5 and 15 years old.
You know, the fact that they're bipedal, they walk on 2 feet just like humans, it sort of looks like a big city full of little people in a way.
With 500,000 penguins, Cape Crozier is the area's largest penguin city.
You know, your first impression is, wow, look at all those crowds of creatures that are walking around doing stuff. What are they doing? And they're always very busy.
Across its ragged slopes, penguin pairs that have spent the winter apart are reuniting. After finding each other at last year's nest site, they mate and then rebuild their summer home.
In the early season, they're getting to know their mate, and they spend a lot of time courting. and making their nests pretty and secure for the eggs that will be coming along.
To breed on a continent that's mostly covered by glaciers, Adelie penguins depend on areas that are free of snow and ice. Barren beachfronts offer the only nest-making materials available: rocks. On the mountainside above the colony, researchers sponsored by the National Science Foundation are also rebuilding. This outpost has been active for almost 50 years.
031 MacOps, go ahead.
MacOps, this is Cape Crozier calling for our daily check-in. There are 5 of us here, and all is well.
Grant Ballard, Viola Toniolo, and their French colleagues, Valère and Amélie, are a new generation of Antarctic explorers. They are using advanced technology to better understand penguins and to see how the birds are responding to dramatic environmental change.
You got everything?
Yep.
To understand life in Penguin City, researchers study and track individuals. For decades, field biologists have been using lightweight flipper bands to identify penguins.
So Valère is doing what we do most of the time we are in Antarctica, which is searching for banded penguins. It's a little bit like looking for a needle in a haystack, so spend a lot of hours just sort of wandering around.
Using bands and nest markers, researchers can log the activities of hundreds of individuals from year to year. Just as census data measures changes in human populations, flipper band data measures shifts in penguin populations.
I see a banded bird right here, so I'm going to get its band number, 44436. And then I'm going to write down the status, which is incubating. So I'm going to write down incubating 2 eggs. And that's basically the whole band searching operation.
The colony is also full of juvenile penguins, 2- and 3-year-old birds that are new to the city.
We call these guys gapers. They look like they might be seeing the big city for the first time or something, and they're just like, oh my God.
Want a pebble?
Young penguins have a lot to learn.
The ones that are not breeding are up to no good, and sometimes they follow you, and they're very curious creatures.
Inexperienced birds explore the colony, searching for new friends and turf of their own. What they often find is trouble. To succeed in the big city, young birds need to learn the language of penguins. That includes sounds and gestures.
It's really loud at a lot of places in the colony, and they use those noises to understand who each other are. So they're always calling, sort of talking to each other.
Well, there's a couple of territorial displays. There is the sideways stare, like, yeah. And then they put their head sideways and point the bill towards the flipper. It's signifying annoyance at the approach of an intruder. The growl. Sometimes they attack us because we have to actually grab them and attach things to them, so we get growled at a lot.
Penguin couples have been fasting for 2 to 3 weeks, living off their fat reserves. Because they produce the eggs, the females need nourishment the most. They will depart for the sea first, leaving the males behind to incubate the eggs. This nest transition gives the biologist a chance to track the penguins.
So we found a pair, and they switched places, and we know for sure that it's about to leave the colony to go find some food. Okay, put it a little lower.
Viola has chosen one female to wear a small tracking device.
Right over the spine. Okay, so you raise a layer of feathers with your knife.
Attached carefully to the bird's feathers, splash tags communicate with satellites and tell researchers where the birds are hunting at sea.
Every day we get an email from each bird with all of the positions of where it is in the Ross Sea.
Another part of the tag records the time and depth of each feeding dive.
Yeah, like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to show the next?
When this penguin returns to the colony, researchers will retrieve the unit and the valuable data it holds. Almost on cue, thousands of females depart across the frozen sea that still surrounds Cape Crozier. Upon reaching the ice edge, the females hesitate. Between them and their hunting grounds is a ravenous leopard seal. In open water, penguins can outswim these monsters. It's getting in and out of the water that's dangerous.
It looks terrible. It's very dramatic when you see it. But a lot of times, if you watch really carefully, the penguin actually gets away.
For the males back in the colony, sitting around incubating an egg is no cushy job. The South Polar skua, a predatory seabird, also nests in the rocks at Cape Crozier. While skuas eat fish, they are also wily predators of penguins and their eggs. Their specialty is tag teaming and incubating adult, especially when the nest sites are alone and vulnerable. This is life in Penguin City. Penguins have been coping with troubles like these for 3 million years. Replenished after more than a week at sea, females make their way back to the colony, and just in time to relieve the hungry and dirty males. It is the first incubation shift.
There's thousands of female Adelie penguins coming in to give their male counterparts a chance to go out and get food. I always like the incubation shift. The males are probably pretty hungry, but they're also really happy to see their mate, and the female is really happy that the mate's still here and the eggs are still here, hopefully, if a skua hasn't gotten them. I think it's a really happy time. The egg is a lot less work than a chick is. They don't have to feed the egg, they just have to make sure they feed themselves. So they have more time to spend together, and they might spend a few hours carrying rocks around to improve their nests or just get a little together time.
Penguin parents are used to dealing with leopard seals and skuas, as well as Antarctica's notorious weather. But around the continent, rising temperatures are putting more moisture in the air, increasing wind speeds, and fueling more powerful storms.
To me, like, what's striking the most is that we're getting more storms with a lot of snow in them. And associated with those storms, it's not just snow, but it's really windy. We've started getting these storms that just blanket the entire colony in a couple feet of snow. Penguins, they don't really respond to it very well. Their instinct is to stay on the nest and which works if it's only about a foot of snow. But once it gets to be like a meter of snow, they can't really get out that easily, and in fact, it buries them. And I think that's kind of weird.
A polar storm lashes the penguins and scientists at Cape Crozier on and off for 5 days. In its aftermath, resourceful penguins have kept their eggs alive by poking air holes and chewing through the drifting snow. But in some recent seasons, blizzards have overwhelmed parts of the colony.
This snowfield that I'm walking across is a result of a single storm in 2001, and it buried thousands of penguins that were incubating their eggs. These dead adults here just emerged from the snowfield that's melting right now. This was so much snow all at once that it literally buried them alive, and they froze on the nest. They haven't needed to evolve the instinct to actually abandon the nest because this kind of situation is so unusual, and it seems like things are changing pretty fast right now.
The recent storm has had one benefit. It has broken apart the sheet of ice in front of Penguin City, allowing penguins easier access to their food. And just in time. The colony is quickly becoming a giant nursery. With new mouths to feed, penguin parents make shorter, more frequent feeding trips. Trips may last a day or two. It all depends on the amount of sea ice and where and when penguins find their prey. To see how much food the parents are catching and giving to their chicks, the scientists have set up a weigh station. In a procedure similar to one used on household pets, penguins are harmlessly injected with a microchip.
Okay.
Each time one of these parents leaves the colony to forage, the weigh bridge identifies them and records their weight.
So first I turn on the weigh bridge.
A computer in a tent nearby stores all the data. When the penguin returns from its feeding trip, hopefully with a belly full of food, its weight is taken again. By subtracting the bird's departure weight from its arrival weight, scientists know how much food the penguin is feeding its chicks. At Cape Crozier, this year's chicks are growing fast. Like a lot of city kids, young penguins grow up in a hurry. By summer's end, they are regularly left on their own, as both parents leave on foraging trips.
Chicks are at an age where they're big enough that they can take care of themselves pretty well. A skua can't come in and pull them out because they weigh so much.
Since parents may be gone for 2 or 3 days at a time, chicks huddle in groups called creches and wait for their next meal. The arrival of an adult often causes what's known as a feeding chase.
The parent is trying to make sure that he's feeding his own chick or her own chick rather than someone else's. So it just gives them a chance to sort of take a look at what's going on, how many chicks are actually chasing him around, and listen for their voices because they're bonded on voice recognition more than visual. But all the chicks in the whole creche will start chasing any parent that comes in because they're hoping that it'll feed them too.
In any given year, the success of penguin cities depends largely on access to open water and food. But in the Ross Sea, a recent cataclysm blocked that access and challenged penguins' survival.
Scientists are tracking 2 huge icebergs that broke off recently from the Ross ice shelf in Antarctica.
In Antarctica, an iceberg that measures about 1,200 square miles is threatening penguins. The iceberg has cut off access to their main food supply and could have a disastrous impact on the population.
In 2000, the world's largest glacier, the Ross Ice Shelf, spawned the world's largest iceberg. Scientists named it B-15. When it grounded off Ross Island, B-15 created a massive ice jam.
We knew it was coming because you could see it in the satellite imagery. You know, all of a sudden we started seeing this white wall on the horizon, and every day it got closer and closer.
It pushed all the smaller icebergs
In
against
front of it, like a big bulldozer. Just
against the
pushed them
shore.
up. And
It's like a ring of icebergs.
yeah, and the penguins had to figure out how to come in anyway. And we thought, well, maybe there won't be any penguins, you know. We were worried they wouldn't even make it at all.
Scientists call cataclysms like this rapid climate change events. Within weeks, B-15 had transformed the region and trapped its penguins behind a giant barrier of ice.
Unbelievably, they found their way through various little pathways and climbing 100 feet up into the air to get over these icebergs. A lot of parents just said forget it because they had to work so much harder to get through all that ice, to get out to the water to get their food. It really changed things for many years.
Over the course of 5 seasons, Cape Crozier's penguins were forced to work harder and travel farther to find their food. As a result, many chicks never gained the weight they needed to survive their first year. During the B-15 years, the number of chicks produced on Ross Island declined by 50%. Finally, in 2005, large waves broke the giant iceberg into smaller pieces, once again providing Adelie penguins access to open water and their prey, and allowing the population a chance to rebound. As difficult as B-15 was for Cape Crozier's penguins, the biggest threat to the species is rising temperatures up north on the Antarctic Peninsula.
What we now know may be just the tip of the global warming iceberg.
The Antarctic Peninsula is one of the fastest warming places on Earth.
700 feet thick and 12,000 years old, this chunk of ice nearly the size of Rhode Island broke up and split off Antarctica this past winter.
The sudden disintegration of the Larsen ice shelf in 2002 is proof that global warming is rapidly altering the polar regions.
This problem is burning a hole in the ice cover that is one of the principal ways our planet cools itself.
Together, the Arctic and Antarctica hold nearly 100% of the world's ice. This ice is a key part of the global climate system. Its highly reflective surface regulates the planet's temperature by reflecting large amounts of the sun's energy back into space. But as the Earth warms, this ice is melting. Once sea ice melts and exposes the dark surface of the ocean, the sun's energy is no longer reflected, but absorbed. The rapid warming of polar seas has triggered a cycle that is overheating the planet, changing weather patterns and threatening many species.
In Antarctica, potential disaster for tens of thousands of baby penguins.
Just as songbirds need trees, Antarctic penguins depend on a certain amount of sea ice. In the open ocean, it is their perch for resting and hunting. And the underside of sea ice is also the nursery for krill, the keystone of Antarctica's food chain and the main prey of penguins. But like ice cubes in a glass of water, the sea ice along the Antarctic Peninsula is melting. As it vanishes, so do the once thriving colonies of Adelie penguins. In a mere decade, experts predict the species will be extinct in this part of Antarctica.
Well, the thing about penguins and sea ice is that their response is immediate. It's the sea ice disappears, the penguin disappears. Climate changes are complex, and Adelie penguins are showing how complex it actually is.
Since David Ainley began studying penguins in 1968, he has seen dramatic changes in their populations.
And they're showing us that the atmosphere is changing in significant ways. These penguins are responding in an immediate fashion to changes in their environment. They're responding on a year-to-year basis.
David and his teammates at Cape Crozier are investigating how the species is dealing with the mixed effects of climate change.
As you increase temperature, then you also change the wind patterns of the Earth. And this is quite noticeable in the Antarctic, where in some areas winds have increased in intensity, particularly near the coast. This ice is floating on the sea, so you can imagine you start blowing on that ice, it's going to move. And so in some parts of Antarctica, within one person's lifetime, we've seen entire colonies of these penguins disappear. But in other parts of Antarctica, penguins are actually doing a lot better.
As David has learned, there is a paradox to climate change. While rising temperatures are threatening Adelie penguins up north, the warming trend is helping them flourish in the south. To further monitor this troubling trend, David has reassembled the penguin science team for a short mission. Their destination? Beaufort Island, a volcanic outcrop in the Ross Sea, home to one of Antarctica's fastest-growing penguin cities.
Okay, folks, well, now that we've picked you up in McMurdo, I'm just going to follow out the channel that we've created over the last few days. I understood you wanted to go to the southwest corner of Beaufort Island, is that correct? Those beaches in there?
Yeah.
Okay.
In summer, it's the job of the U.S. Coast Guard icebreaker to open a shipping lane through miles of solid sea ice.
Right there, right there.
It's an overnight journey to get to the island.
Oh my God, that is amazing.
While most of the ship's crew sleeps, Grant and Viola marvel at the show off the bow.
I know, it's really pretty.
Two of Antarctica's biggest predators, minke and killer whales, take advantage of the channel to explore new hunting grounds. By morning, Beaufort Island is in sight. For transport to the island, the team is required to wear polar safety gear.
This is a dry suit.
Watertight suits will protect them from an unexpected plunge into the Ross Sea.
I think I'm gonna bake in here.
Something is really weird here.
If they can ever get them on.
Should I go all the way? Getting a little hot. They're gonna put the boats in the water, and then we're gonna storm the beach, and the penguins won't stand a chance.
We're off to Beaufort Island.
Give me line one! Heads up!
How is rapid climate change making the southern Ross Sea ideal for penguins? In recent seasons, warmer temperatures and increased winds have dispersed the heavy winter sea ice, allowing penguins better access to food. And Beaufort Island's glaciers are melting, opening up new nesting areas. The result? A booming penguin city.
A decade ago, this colony was totally hemmed in by either precipitous cliffs or snow. This snow has been receding because of the warmer temperatures. So now this colony has the room to expand.
This surge in penguins may be temporary. It depends on how global warming continues to affect southern Antarctica.
Catch the fast ones.
To monitor a city of 130,000 penguins, the team will put flipper bands on 400 of its newest residents. Some U.S. Coast Guard officers have volunteered to help them get the job done.
So much feathers fly that gets in your face and it tickles.
The chicks are molting, shedding their downy coats and showing adult feathers designed for the sea.
The molted ones are squirmers.
Pretty far along. They've got big flippers. You ready to be weighed?
After the chicks are banded, measured, and weighed,
925.
they become lifetime members of an exclusive club.
One more group. Dave's using an advanced technique over there.
These bands, part of 2,800 placed on Adelie penguins this year, will enable the team to track the region's penguins for years to come. As scientists monitor the movements of penguins around Antarctica, they'll be learning how the species is responding to the effects of a rapidly changing climate.
We're claiming we're done.
Having finished banding 400 penguins, the team heads back to their respective field camps on Ross Island. The dramatic shift in penguin populations has caught the attention of a polar legend. Half a century ago, Dr. William Sladen pioneered the use of flipper bands on Adelie penguins, as he documented in his own 1970 film, Penguin City. At 86, Bill Sladen is returning to Ross Island and the Cape Royds penguin colony that he first studied in 1959. The visit is also a chance to reunite with an old friend.
Bill Sladen began by sledding behind dogs, surviving the rigors of the winter in parts of Antarctica, living in a tent for months on end. He brought along people to share his expertise over the past few decades.
Dave, I thought that you might like some emperor penguin eggs.
Like his former student, David Ainley.
Are there any left there at the... Wow, mangoes.
This is a 1940 issue from Falkland Islands Dependency Survey. It's a string vest, which we used for sledging. And it's really very good. It's a good... produces a nice little warm spot in your skin. There.
Ooh, nice.
Great. Last time I wore this was 1970, when Dave Ainley was down with me. This work on the Adelie penguin is one of the longest studies of a seabird that we know, and it's very, very important to establish long-term studies.
Since Sladen was last here, temperatures have risen 3 degrees Celsius, and the penguin population has tripled. While the penguin colonies that he studied in northern Antarctica are disappearing. For Sladen, penguins provide one of the best ways to monitor climate change and its effects on all polar life.
These Adelie penguins are indicators because they live in the pack ice, and the pack ice is diminishing up in the Antarctic Peninsula, and it's increasing down here. And there's more open water, there's more access to food here. So it's a dynamic situation which needs to be studied year after year. So are you weighing these birds at the moment?
Yeah.
David shows Sladen the latest advancements in penguin tracking.
Well, it's got to go across the scale first.
Has it learned to do that? Fantastic. Certainly moving into a new era of ornithology in being able to follow these birds as they go out to sea. We weren't able to do that. I've never done this. This is all new stuff. Penguin, just remain quiet for a little bit more.
Together, they will send a penguin equipped with a splash tag on a late-season foraging trip.
A fighter, we like the fighters.
Though Adelie penguins' responses to climate change are complex, one thing is clear. Ross Island is the home to the southernmost penguin colonies on the planet. If sea ice disappears from here, Adelie penguins will have nowhere else to go and may become extinct.
Here's a bird coming in from the sea, right fresh, glossy plumage. Hey, hi there. Hi there.
At Cape Crozier, Grant and Viola need to retrieve their last splash tag and the data it holds.
We have radio transmitters attached to the penguin, and if the penguin is at the surface and it's close enough, we can hear it. You know, you see these penguins leaving the beach, and they just head out into the blue, and you have no idea what they're doing, where they're going, and you know, you can guess, but without these satellite transmitters, you have no idea. Now this bird's close. Here. Just arrived. What we really care about is the diving data that they're carrying. Somewhere, he's coming across the snow probably.
Over there.
I really want a submarine. That'd be cool. We could chase them underwater. But I think the satellite transmitters probably cost a little less than the submarine. We know exactly how far they have to go to get the food. We know how long they spend getting the food. We know how deep in the ocean they have to dive. We know the temperature of the water that they're diving into. And we also know how dark it is, how dark the water is where they are. So we can put all that together to get a picture of what it's like for the penguins in any given day of the year to find food to bring back to their chicks.
There he goes.
Penguin scientists will spend the rest of the year analyzing this data to track how the birds are responding to climate change. Having reared big and healthy young penguins, the adults have finished the job here. It's time for parents and chicks to go their separate ways.
I think so.
Okay, time to weigh him.
One left.
2775.
2775.
172.
172. Cool.
The scientific team has also completed their assignment.
That's it?
That's it. We're done. We're finished.
All right.
We did 50 chicks, and they're all big.
Yeah.
None was less than 1 kilo, and most of them were more than 2 kilos.
And we're covered in guano, and it's kind of messy.
You look pretty bad, actually.
Like the adult penguins, it's time for them to leave. For the chicks, ready or not, they must take the big plunge. They have never touched the water, let alone hunted for food. Instinct compels them into the sea. If all goes well, the chicks overcome their fear and the obstacles in front of them to return someday as the newest residents of Penguin City. Their ability to overcome the changing climate remains to be seen.
It's amazing to see what they can cope with. But they're going to eventually run out of options. For the Earth to actually warm up even a few degrees Celsius is a really big deal. It changes the way weather patterns work all around the Earth. And what we're seeing here is a lot of changes that are happening in a short period of time. Things that haven't happened in 1,000 years or in 40,000 years are happening right now while we're watching. Well, when I was 16, I was, oh my God.
Whoa,
Amazing.
wow.
Wow. A whole chunk of that ice sheet just fell off. Look at the wave coming along the coastline. Those penguins are going to get swept away.
Oh my God. All those chicks.
Wow. It is days like this where you're going, things seem to be kind of changing. You're like, wow. And it literally is right before your eyes, you know.
There is no doubt. The Earth is rapidly warming and threatening big changes, not only to penguins and other polar life, but to us. One of the best ways to monitor global warming and the planet's future is to keep our eyes on penguins. To learn more about Antarctic penguins and climate change, visit penguinscience.com.